What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. The League of Legends closed beta began on April 11th in 2009 and ended on October 21st, when all accounts were reset to level 1 and given the King Rammus skin. But League of Legends didn't really start to kick off in popularity until late 2011, and as a result, a large portion of you guys probably have little to no idea of just how different the beta was to the game today. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, and if you don't enjoy the video, please click the dislike. And if this video hits, let's say 10,000 ratings, I'll make a video about the history of the League of Legends meta. Anyways, let's get started. The League of Legends beta was closed for almost the entire duration of its existence. In fact, the true open beta only lasted about 6 whole days while the servers were being tested for launch. However, the League of Legends beta isn't something that's remembered as particularly exclusive, because every single person who got into the closed beta was given 5 game keys to give to their friends as a way of sort of marketing the game. Then when they gave one of their friends a key, that friend would also get 5 more keys for players to join. So although it was technically a closed beta the entire time, it was relatively easy to get access to the game from a friend, or maybe by finding someone online who had extra keys. And you gotta hand it to Riot, that's a pretty sweet form of marketing a game in a beta if you ask me. Anyways, during the beta there was a patch about every single week, and there was no form of meta that existed. It was a simpler time, but also much crazier. As you would launch the League of Legends client, you were met with this wonderful old login screen and would go on to be met with the old PvP.net client. That actually wasn't too far off from our client today, just with a different interface. You still had your profile page, the store, settings menu, same way of queuing up, but the post-match screens were a lot different, and the UI as a whole was completely different and has gone through a ton of changes to reach how it is today, but the same features remain intact for the most part. As well, the champions during beta were much different. The overall power level of champions across the board during the beta was generally much higher than it was today. But even though the champions in general were much stronger, there are quite a few that stick out as truly mind-boggling. Heimerdinger was able to place up to 6 turrets on the map, which led to some really crazy shenanigans, apart from just being overpowered, such as using his turrets to block minions to eventually build up this gigantic wave for one huge massive push. Blitzcrank's ultimate would silence for 5 seconds, and you were able to use flash to extend the range of his grab to incredibly ridiculous lengths. Evelynn had a permanent stealth with no indicator and a targeted stun, and could run around and gank people like crazy, walking through wards and right into lanes with no indication at all of her coming. Soraka could give both herself and her allied champions mana back using her E, and Kassadin was able to steal mana from his opponents using his W, and could cast his ultimate while rooted with a 1.0 AP ratio on a Z and absurd damage values across the board. And of course, the most memorable might be Twisted Fate. Back in beta, Twisted Fate's point and click teleport was actually on his E, and had a 40-second cooldown with a global range, while his ultimate revealed and slowed all enemy champions on the map. His gold card was also an area of effect stun instead of single target, and as I'm sure you can imagine, it was pretty insane. The items back then were also much different to today. Remember that gold back then was acquired at a fairly slower rate than it is now, so generally across the board the items were cheaper, but also a bit stronger too, and there were a few that are worth mentioning. The passive of Rapidon's Death Cap and the active of Zhonya's Hourglass were contained into one Superman AP item called Zhonya's Ring, which was an incredible offensive and defensive tool for any caster, which of course was crazy powerful. Innervating Locket was an item that during the beta wouldn't just give massive sustain to anyone who used it, but it also gave that sustain and crazy healing to all surrounding friendly units, both minions and champions, making it an incredible item for team-wide tankiness, sieging, sustain, and just overall dominance. Sunfire Capes also stacked, meaning that you could build as much as 6 Sunfire Capes if you wanted to and still be able to deal massive damage to someone by just standing next to them, while still having a lot of health and armor. And even items as simple as Heart of Gold gave a crazy amount of defensive stats at the time, both HP and armor, and Aegis of the Legion's aura gave 35 armor, 40 magic resistance and 12 attack damage to yourself and your entire team, making it an unbelievable utility tool. And as I'm sure you've noticed by some of the gameplay in the background already, Summoner's Rift was quite different to how it was today. In the beta, Summoner's Rift had about twice as many bushes as it does now. There's a reason why the tri-bush is called what it is, and it's because it actually used to be 3 separate bushes at that location. As well, there were much more bushes in the river and jungle, and even at Baron and Dragon. It made juking through bushes way too easy, further adding more power to champions like Twisted Fate, who could give global vision. And we can all appreciate that Rengar didn't exist during that time. Monsters in the jungle could critically strike, and Baron buff gave 400 global gold and 90 attack damage and ability power for the duration of the buff. Baron's attacks also had a shorter range, so there were quite a few champions who could outrange him completely and solo him without taking a single point of damage, such as Karthus with his Q, or a level 18 Tristana using her passive. Runes and Masteries were also added into the game in the early alpha as a core part of the leveling experience, to give players the feeling of accomplishment, or maybe like a small token of their efforts upon leveling up, but they looked a lot different to how they do today. In beta, the Masteries looked like this. Not too far off from how the trees were structured up until Season 6, but the individual Masteries were much different, and since went through multiple reworks and redesigns. Notably, there were masteries to improve every single summoner spell by giving a passive or maybe affecting the active based on the cooldown of the ability. A mastery that also gave you base crit chance, and at the end of the offensive tree there was a mastery that increased all damage you dealt by just a straight up percentage. And a lot of the masteries do share names with the other masteries that we see today too. Apart from a lot of minor tweaks and number changes, individual runes used to drop at a random chance and weren't actually purchasable from the shop, so it was quite a grind to build up a perfect rune page, and you would often end up with just a mixed up grab bag of individual runes and had to sort and fit the pieces of what you just had to form an acceptable rune page, and you would have to use the rune combiner a lot to reroll the things you had in hopes of getting what you wanted. In addition, during the very early stages of the alpha version of League, summoner spells were added into the game as a way of trying to make the gameplay a little bit more different than Defense of the Ancients, and among the differences that we see from the summoner spells that are still in the game today, there were a few summoner spells that have since been removed. First on the list we have Fortify. It was a summoner spell that granted invulnerability to all nearby towers and increased their attack speed by 100% for 7 seconds, but it could also be cast while dead if your corpse was near a turret, and you were granted assists and kills on any target that the turret assisted on or killed accordingly. It became a core part of defensive strategy, but was also used as an offensive option with taunts and stuff like Blitzcrank's grab to double the damage a tower dealt to a target once they were pulled in. As well, there was a summoner spell called Rally that would summon a ward that increased the attack damage of all nearby units. It had a decent amount of health and could be killed, and could also be used to tank turrets, but unlike Fortify, this summoner spell was removed because it kinda sucked. And on a 4-minute and 30-second cooldown, it's not hard to see why, but it did exist in the game, although it wasn't a very popular option unlike Fortify. But as well, a few of the summoner spells that are still in the game today had much more powerful effects, or generally were just stronger. Flash had about double the range and half the cooldown as it does today, and Cleanse, which at the time was known as Boost, was much more powerful too. Although it didn't remove stuns, it would remove silences, snares, and slows, and instead what it did was that it would provide you with a spell shield that lasted for 30 whole seconds. And oh yeah, it was on a 90-second cooldown. Later in the beta it was nerfed and then eventually remade into the cleanse that we know today, but I'm sure you can imagine how crazy it was back then for a short while. Looking back at the beta, it's crazy just how different it really was to the game today, but it also gives an appreciation for just how far the game has come. I mean, who knows, maybe I'll be making this kind of video for the game we're playing right now, 5 years down the line. And that's just about it. Here are some of my favorite comments from a previous video where I asked what your favorite off-meta build was. For a chance to be featured in a future video, leave a comment about what your favorite thing from the League of Legends beta was. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Back of Uber News, halfway on my two shoes, the agent to a game daddy sure to lose. major symptomatic fecal flaws due to twisting, gut affliction, back and forth, and it's time I know.